is adjunct faculty in the School of Business, and there's a long list of what all he has done, and you can look it up on the web. I'll send it to you. And we're very happy to have him talk to us, and we have had him talk to us for previous terms, and the students really enjoyed his lecture on Indian economics, and his views are really enjoyed by the students. So let's give a round of applause.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. Happy Holi, right? Today, and I think a few people may be familiar with Holi now, thanks to Color Run. Previously, people in India knew, the rest of the world didn't know about it, but then what usually the developed world does best, they did it. Just hijacked it, gave it a different name, and then it became Color Run, and everybody knows about it. So that's what it is today, so Festival of Colors. So no, I won't bore you with Indian economics, okay? There'll be a little bit of that. There'll be a little bit of Indian business. I mean, it's a management school, so there has to be some, elements of economics and business, otherwise it will be nothing. Yes, I will share with you my views. I'll walk you through different aspects of not only business and economics about India, but also about the society. I will try to stay away from whatever has been covered or is being going to be covered and so on. So I'll stay away from that. If something is being repeated, except for a couple of minutes, raise your hand and say, Venkat, move on. Right? Other than that, let me begin with the discussions, what we plan to talk about and cover. We will begin somewhere way back, but we'll also bring you right down to February 2019, by the time I finish. So you'll have a spectrum of things to hear about and understand. One request I have, and which worked in the previous sessions, could we have the questions, right to the end, right at the end? But if any of the slide is not clear or a point made is not clear, please ask. But if you want me to elaborate or discuss about some of the, commonly asked Indian topics, stay till the end. Those can be brought up later, and then we could have a lively discussion. Right? Good, because sometimes some of those questions are covered in later slides. Okay, so let's begin from the beginning, not from Mohenjo-daro and Harappa or like 5,000 years of Mahabharata or anything like that. But typically, what do people think about or often know about in India, right? 1 billion people. Right? And if some of them are spilling over, then just learn to live with that. That's what is the thing. It's not that big a country compared to some other countries which have got luxury of space. So 1 billion people are like crunched into a relatively smaller space for 1 billion people. And these are some pictures taken. And this also represents the reality. These pictures, I think, came out last year. Somebody took drone pictures. The nicely colorful blue things are unfortunately the shanty, the slum areas, and they're right next to the wealthy neighborhoods in Mumbai. So what people know is that extreme poverty and extreme wealth stay next to each other. There's a couple of other pictures of the same areas. So the vicinity of Dharavi. So people normally know about too much population, they know about too much poverty, but let's get that into a context. And that's what I plan to do today. My talk is not sponsored by Indian High Commission or Government of India, but I don't have to spend time talking about the negativities of India. All you have to do is to switch on CNN or or BBC or anybody. So that comes aplenty. So I'm just going to try and contextualize and hopefully share with you some of the other sides of some of those of the same country and the same society. Right? But let's pause for a moment, and I'm sure you have looked at this in your thing, but it will probably help you to keep in mind for my discussions too. Is India really a country? The way we go about talking about it and bashing it, whether it is, it's not only, this question is not only relevant for India, it's also when you talk about China, it's also when you talk about Brazil. Smaller nations, I'm not referring to Singapore at all, smaller nations in Europe and elsewhere just pick up and pounce on the problems of China and Brazil and India as if some of their own low, small country solutions can be like planted there. Many of these countries are continent size. Anyway, coming back to India, which is the topic for me today, look at this comparison. European Union, yes, it is larger, but this is the new European Union. If you only look at the before the East European countries started joining the EU, if you look at that, it's roughly the same as India, roughly. Okay? Population, you can see for yourself, twice the current numbers in the past because the ratio was even more skewed towards India. Religion, Europe, EU is mostly homogeneous and a little bit of diversity, but that itself is causing its own European problems. But India, every known religion in the world is there in India. Not only now, it was there before. Jewish synagogues, Jewish community. Oh, it is not those who came from New York or those who came from Israel. These were Indians who were following Judaism. You had Islam come in quite early. You had Christianity coming in very early. So all the known religions of the world, almost all of them exist in this country. Languages. Europe has got 24 languages. India has roughly the same. And depending upon which Government of India statistics you read, the number of dialects in India is anywhere between 800 to 1,000. Even they themselves are sometimes not sure like how many dialects should be counted this way. Number of countries in the EU compares with the number of states in India. Plus there are centrally governed territories which are known as union territories. Almost homogeneous population, and I fully understand and appreciate that there is the African migration which is happening now. There's from the erstwhile French colonies, people have moved. Erstwhile UK colonies, people have moved. So yeah, it is a bit more diverse, but it is still mainly Europoid. But every known race in the world has people in India. I've had this experience. I used to be in the career office in SMU, and a lot of students at that time had sent across to India and Middle East for internship. Some of them came back and had this interesting experience that they went to Taj Mahal, they went to see the Red Fort, and they said that when they went to the counter to pay for the ticket, the ticket charges for foreigners is like 10 times or something like that, compared to what's the local fee. Maybe the ratio has changed, but something like that. It was all in dollars. So our Singaporean friends went to the counter to pay for the ticket, and the guy asked, student? And they said, yes. University? They said, SMU. And by habit, right? And that guy said, okay. And he just charged them the Indian rupee rate for Indians, because he thought SMU was Sikkim Manipal University, number one. Number two, a lot of people from the Northeast do look like reasonably enough with people from this country. And there are a lot of instances in India where those people have been misunderstood to be foreigners, and especially guys at those ticket counters and public service counters who have by mistake asked the Indian nationals that you're a foreigner have had the rap that like you don't recognize us. And so those guys, some of them want to play it safe, and he just without a question he gave them all tickets in Indian rupees for Indian citizens. So that's proof enough that people of all races are there in India. What are the common myths about India? most Indians are vegetarians. No way, right? Vegetarianism is probably 30 to 40% of the country at the most, right? All Indians are Hindus. This is another myth. No, that's not true. India has the world's second largest Muslim population in the world. Okay, next to Indonesia. So it's not many other countries which are Islamic. It's India, which is number 2. But I believe Pakistan is actively growing the population, so maybe they're pretty close to overtaking the Indian Muslim population. And many people say, hey, Russians speak Russian, Japanese speak Japan, they speak Japanese, so Indians should speak Indian, right? But you just saw in the previous slide there are like 22 different languages. There is no language called Indians, right? And people think that like Indians are very traditional. Yes, there are traditional Indians, but not everybody is very traditional. People think that all our marriages are arranged. Yes, some still are, but not necessarily. Right? And I already talked about the poverty and things like that. That comes first in the top of the mind when we talk about India. But that exists. But so do other things exist. Snake charmers, yeah, you can find them. If you go to 5-star hotels at about like 7 p.m. before dinner, they are there to entertain the people, right? So, but then why are Indians the way they are? Right? And I'm talking about Indian Indians, right? Because you grow up learning to live without certain things. Infrastructure is a problem. Huge problem. And by chance, anyone here who grew up in India? No? Okay, fine. So now just ask, because they can easily tell you that before their A-levels or the equivalent, their parents would tell them, be prepared. They could be in the best cities, in the best communities, best areas, but they would tell them, complete all your revisions well in advance. No one knows when the power blackout will be there, and it could be on the eve of your exam. And you are solely responsible. Nobody is responsible if you push things for the last minute. So it's in your psyche, and you don't expect infrastructure to function, even if it is functioning right now, right? So it's always like you're trained to live without things. Even if you have the luxury to have them, you're still trained to live without them. Right? And if you don't have the privilege to have them, then you kind of trained to accept what life gives them. Traditionally, time has been plentiful. It was an agrarian society. Agrarian economies do have a lot of time, right? And so weddings go on for 3 to 5 days. Festivals last for a week. There's one festival called, I'm sure Prof. covered it, the Navratri or the Dashera, which is, in Singapore everybody says Diwali. Diwali is like one day, it just comes and goes, nobody knows when it started, when it ended, it's like too fast, right? And for Indians in Singapore, it's usually closer to one of your final exams, whichever grade you are, whether it's primary school, whether it is secondary school, whether it is university, JC, it's always close to a exam that you're taking, year-end exam you're taking, so like Deepavali just comes and goes, nobody notices it, right? But there is a festival which lasts for 10 days, and very colorful, and so people do celebrate it in Singapore. If you go to some of the temples at that time, that usually September, October, if you go there, you'll find it's really long, 10-day festival, and it's really colorful. So, yeah. Indians, we just get to start talking. I mean, you're seeing a sample of that right now. This will go on for 2 hours, so you have a proof of that statement right in front of you. So, this guy was head of HR for Asia Pacific at TCS, and he had an interesting take on this based on whatever he looked at. And he said that it's been, many of things come from our history and background that it's made Indians adaptable because there have been invasions, there were changes, there's multiple religion, multiple languages. I'll give you an example of how adaptability, what it means, right? you read that there were like 22 official languages, right, and 29 states. So most of the states have their own languages. Okay. Prof and I come from neighboring, originally, I mean, I grew up in Delhi, but otherwise, ethnically, we come from two neighboring southern states. Okay. They have a common border, and Bangalore is well known, capital of the state where Karnataka, where she comes from, and I come from Tamil Nadu. The Karnataka border, there are cities which are like about 50 kilometers away maximum, right? The border. So what I'm saying is, if I just cross over the border, I could be totally illiterate in her state, because every signboard, except some of the statutory ones which have to be in English and Hindi or something, most of them would have in Kannada script. That's the language that she speaks. And I can't read them. I can't take a bus because the destination and the origin will be written in Kannada, unless they have made it bilingual, but usually it is. And the shops, signs, so many things will be in her language, which I can't read at all. So it takes me no time to be an illiterate, which also means to be a foreigner in my own country. So that is true, not for me, I'm saying like for every Indian, that happens, because which is right next door, if they cross over, they can't read the sign. You identify this is a clinic because there is a red cross sign on it. So when Indians migrate, it's not very difficult for them to adjust, because they are used to be foreigners, quote unquote, in their own country. So that helps, that also helps you understand that they have to quickly adapt, even in their own country, outside of their home. They have to adapt, and to India itself being multicultural, they have to adapt to that. And given the way things are, people are trained to be be patient, be more tolerant, and if your infrastructure doesn't work, you will believe in destiny. If you can't predict your weather, you believe in destiny. Only when man has managed to conquer nature that he is less believing in destiny, because he knows that he can, he can ensure that there is going to be light when there is no light, and there's going to be cool air conditioning when it is hot outside. So he has more control over his environment. Other than that, you do believe in destiny. So that's the challenge they face. And given all those challenges, Indians do tend to improvise. So you would find that they may use a railway carriage and attach tires, wheels to it, or they may even, if they find that the truck was a better mode of transport, on the railway track, they would use an appropriate wheel for it and use it on the railway track. So improvisation is the name of the game. And there's a word for it. It's called jugaad. If you talked about it, it's called jugaad. Jugaad is basically an extreme level of improvisation to get things done in any which way, so that you can get things done, basically. So do whatever it takes to get things done. It is sometimes pushed to some extremes, but we will talk about that a little later. So since we said that they are trained to be adaptable, they are also, there is shortage of infrastructure, there is shortage of material, at least over the many years, they have learned to manage with what they have. And these are some of the common games that kids play, people play, for which you hardly need anything. So this is a picture of a game called Kabaddi, where you just hold your breath and you form two teams, and you hold your breath and go into the other person's territory and knock out a few people, and they would in turn do that. But what do you need? Nothing. You just need an open space, draw a line in between which says that this is your territory, my territory, invasion, territory capture. That's all. So, And you don't need any special equipment, no ball, no bat, nothing. And now this game is catching on, and there are league matches taking place. There are Asian games and so on and so forth. Cricket, of course, is popular. This is another traditional thing which has now become part of some of the festivities. They just form a human pyramid, and right there at the top is a pot, decorated pot. It may have valuables. It may have, traditionally it used to have just curd, yogurt, but probably now there are some riches to get or whatever, and they form a human pyramid and rise to the top, and they have to knock down that pot. So, as you can see, you don't need much gear, much safety protection, etc., etc. Right? And so they manage to do with limited things. That's what Indians grew up with. As I said, they manage, they innovate, but sometimes, as I said, to the extreme. You already know about this, that it's a multi-religious nation, so I won't spend more time on this. But let's move on to a little bit of sort of economic history of the country, wee bit, because the past in India matters to understand the present, and how the transformation, the transition that we are seeing is happening. So you need to understand from where to know what is happening and why some of the things are the way they are, or why there is a push to change some of those things. From the time India got independence, 1947, for next almost the 4 decades and a little more, India was pretty much inward looking. Import substitution, produce yourself, don't depend on imports. Right? Nationalization, major industries will be sort of owned by the government. But let's face it, that was the economic philosophy of that time. UK was doing something similar. Singapore had its government-linked corporations. So was the case in many, many countries. It is not just India which followed that. But even China moved out of that. Not only UK moved out of it during the Thatcher era, Singapore moved out of it at different stages, times. Even China left that philosophy behind and moved forward. India was literally the last one. Crisis literally dragged it to the new era. So that has been one of the challenges. So government sector monopolies were supported. Everything you had to get license and permit, and there was over-regulation of the private sector. And this is not just a phrase for here. Can you imagine Colgate, Unilever, if they produced more toothpaste than, because they were efficient, than what they were given the license for, they would be punished. So that was the level of government control and interference, and looking at it another way, if you are more productive, you're going to be penalized. And there was no innovation because there was no incentive to innovate, because only 2 companies had the license to make cars, and they didn't change a bit from the car models of the 1950s. There was no incentive to innovate. Foreign direct investment was discouraged, foreign technology, foreign competition, everything was discouraged. So if you are a businessman then, especially the big companies, you had everything protected. Right? Industrial labor, along with the culture of that time, whether it was UK, whether it was India, and everywhere, there was more unionization, and they were able to do collective bargaining, and so that was yet another trend of that period of time. So which meant, like I mentioned, low productivity, low growth, so much so that there used to be a phrase called Hindu rate of growth, because India never broke through the 3%, 3.5% growth. So people said that, like, oh, that's an Indian or Hindu rate of growth, and they will be stuck always in that. But finally that changed ultimately. So the incentives to invest was not there. And it does not mean that there were no foreign companies in India. There were no multinationals. That's not the case. Multinationals did exist, right? And so you had Unilever was always there. Colgate was there. Coca-Cola, multinational banks were there at that time. The engineering, major pharmaceutical companies were all there despite those conditions. And I'm sure they also enjoyed it because there was not going to be any other competitor coming in, so they were there in a protected market for themselves. But then in 1991, there was, 1977, there was even more restrictive regime that came in, and they said like, okay, there should not be more than 50% holding by foreign companies, and so Unilever and all accepted it and brought down their holdings, whereas Coca-Cola and IBM said like, no, we will stick to this, and Coca-Cola was also told to divulge the formula and so on, so they didn't. And these two companies, most notably, left the country, and so they had once they left, so that was kind of symbolic, and the things became worse in many respects in the sort of 80s. But also, it also helped in some way. Today, the IT strength of India came also as an unintended consequence. Nobody planned it. But because there were IBM machines and IBM had left the country, so entrepreneurial, innovative guys and there was the engineering talent anyway. Some of them who were working in IBM came out. Some of the others started their own companies, first to service and improve the IBM machines, and then to come out with other similar machines and so on, which subsequently, when the IT era came in, you had a backbone of the people who were very well trained in that. So there was an unintended positive consequence too. Finally, in the 1991 and beyond, India woke up slowly, and it was a foreign exchange crisis. They had like very little foreign exchange, almost about $1 billion, which that time could take care of 10 days or 14 days foreign exchange requirements. So it was pretty bad, and they decided that they should go whole hog and open out the economy. So that after 1991, India was part of the globalization game, and India opened up, and you had many restrictions that were removed. The devaluation took place. Some of the state enterprises were denationalized. India became member of the WTO. India signed a common economic cooperation agreement with Singapore, and then ASEAN, and so on and so forth. They were afraid that the opening would bring in a lot of foreign companies which will crush Indian companies, but the opposite happened. Indian companies grew well, and they started taking over. They started going global and subsequently taking over companies abroad. So you had the Tata Group taking over the Jaguar, taking over Land Rover, they took over the Chorus Steel, and there were many other takeovers that happened in line with the times, where the Chinese companies were doing that and Indian companies were doing that, and so on and so forth. So the opposite of what they were always fearing for decades actually happened. Is this being recorded, or is it on or not?
Yes.
Look, I don't see any red light or anything. Okay. Drivers for globalization. One was trade liberalization that India did, and India became more integrated with the foreign markets. International finance and investment started taking place. It was from both sides. That means a foreign investment was coming into India, and as India built up its own reserves and Indian companies were able to borrow abroad, they also started investing abroad. Right? Technological change, India actually benefited a lot from India, because many of the technologies, you had the talent pool to go and support abroad. But not only that, India was a huge beneficiary of the dot-com crisis. What happened was there was over-investment in the undersea cables for telecommunication. And that was irrational exuberance and overinvestment, and when the market collapsed, this is not some software or paper packaging that you can throw away or like recycle. These are infrastructure that you have invested and built, and the company goes bankrupt, WorldCom and others. Those infrastructure are still going to be there. So Indian companies, as well as some of the other emerging nation companies, went in and bought those existing infrastructure for cents, which the investment might have been in dollars, right? So like that small investment that they had to make compared to because all the assets were being were on distress sale. So not only India, a lot of Asia and all our free calls and free WhatsApp, whenever you do that, think about it. Somebody invested in all these infrastructure and they all went bankrupt, and we are enjoying the fruits of it because these companies which are providing these either got it for nothing or they invested very little on the hard infrastructure. So those assets were all on distress sale, and Indian companies went and bought it, so did many others. So all those technology changes again worked in India's favor, as they did for other emerging economies. Lots of things that I talk about India in my discussion today would also be relevant for other emerging economies. Of course, you have to modify to the local context. And this production, around the world, people started moving production from only the home base to other places. Whether it is manufacturing, whether it is software production, whether it was back office services, whether it was call centers, things started moving across the borders because of the technological changes. Because technology was available and at very low cost, very, very affordable for them. So the MNCs started coming back, multinationals. So you had sector-wise, you find Coke came back, Pepsi was there, all your fast food giants came back, Nike, Adidas came back, so they weren't there, so they came for the first time. Cosmetics companies, Korean companies, very interesting case to look at. Korean companies, because they spotted that there could be a good potential and growth in that market, so they invested heavily in India, in whether it was white goods or whether it was, and then subsequently built their business as India became an important market for phones and other electronic products. So literally, every sector you find foreign investments started coming back, coming into the country. Questions before I proceed further? Anything that you haven't understood, you want me to clarify before I go to the next segment? Yes?
I read one of the articles for our classes. I think our late Minister Mentor, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, recognized back in 2005 that for India to really grow, he has to open up more to FDI, and he recognized that bureaucracy is one of the problems that was hampering its growth. And this is actually a mindset problem because a lot of Indians see themselves as regulators rather than as facilitators. So I was just wondering whether there was anything that was actually done to change the mindset, any programs that the government introduced or something.
The liberalization that took place at that period of time in the 90s was phenomenal. But after that, it has not happened again so much. Right? There were some of the major institutions, whether it was the car company Suzuki's joint venture, whether it was some of the private sector public sector banks which were denationalized. Some of them, not all of them. So there was a movement at that time and unexpectedly from some of the bureaucrats of that era to really liberalize. But it's not been a continuous thing. There is more liberalization still required in that country. It's not gone to the extent it is. It is gradually happening, and there's always it's very interesting. See, India is a very pluralistic country. It's a very vocal democracy, right? And you will find that opposition to denationalize or like say, sell off the government enterprises comes most loudly from the parties who are in the opposition. Okay? Then in the election, if they come to power, the role reverses. The ones who are shouting the loudest against it, they start talking about like, yeah, we should denationalize. And those who are on the side of denationalization, who are now sitting in the opposition, they shout, no, these are all national assets, you should not be, our workers will suffer and so on. So basically there is also a political tendency to gather what is called the vote bank. To win the next election, how are you going to get, and union labor votes can be en masse if you are saying things which are populist and which, so it's not been easy process, even if there are people in the, who would think and have these ideas that we should do it or we understand it. The political decisions are not very easy. They wanted to do that to disinvest their holdings in Air India, and with a lot of protests from the union and so on, and so a lot of pressure. Finally, the proposal that they put forward was not at all interesting for anyone to bid for. So nobody showed any interest. So technically, and this kind of thing happens. So yeah, India has these challenges which probably China doesn't have, Singapore doesn't have. You can execute what you think about, but India has a very loud political pluralistic democracy, so it does have challenges that it faces. Yes,
on a related note, I just want to get your thoughts. Like, what do you think about the potential liberalization of like the Indian legal industry? Because India means a massive market, but yet its law firms are still closed off. You don't allow international law firms to come in and set up shop. But what do you think is the rationale behind it? Because while I get that maybe you don't want to like denationalize certain like you said national assets, but the idea of a legal market is that surely that would lead to further economic growth, right?
First and foremost, I mean, I'm not the one who's saying firstly, I don't have an expertise in law or legal business in India. So far, touch wood, happy, I haven't had to talk to those guys. So and I'm sure my life is good. Some of those from the law school may not agree with that, but anyway, I'm not in favor of the fact that they have not denationalized some of the whatever they call as icons and things like that. They should have been privatized. And government has proved time and again that it's not been efficiently managed. So that is one thing. But this is a different thing. This is about, accountancy, law in different countries, you have this problem. And India is not the only country which has this problem. Many countries have this, number one. Number two, service sector liberalization is not an easy thing anywhere in the world. When in all the WTO thing, when other countries tell India, okay, allow more goods to be imported, India says, okay, you open up your services sector, and all countries back off. Right? So if even on bilateral negotiations, India may say, will you open to the other country? Okay, if I were to open, will you open? Right? Countries have their issues, when it comes to medical, when it comes to many of the professional services. Whether it's Singapore, whether it's Malaysia, whether it is US, whether it is UK, they all have their restrictions on whether they want to open it or they don't want to open it and how they open it carefully and things like that. So I don't have a big take on it, but look, you can pick sector by sector and you can pick any country in the world, so-called liberal countries. Why is there a trade war almost about to happen between Canada and USA? The most peaceful, right? And why do they have a fight about Wisconsin cow versus, Canada restricting US milk to come into that country? Every country has its own sacred cows that they want to protect when it comes to these things. So, will Indian economy hugely benefit by foreign legal companies? I don't think so. But am I in favor of liberalization? Yes. Of the legal sector or accountancy sector. But let's not fast forward and say that India's growth will take off just because more foreign lawyers will come into the country. Now, come on. Hey, if we are less litigant society, I think it's a healthy society. But I'm not saying that India is a less litigant society, but the point being, any society that doesn't become as litigant as the American society or some other societies, I think it's a healthy thing. Sorry, but lawyers can do the contracts, right? They don't have to be litigant about it. That's all my take on it. Okay, so let's move on to the other aspects. Let's talk about, and what would you expect in the next segment of the discussion. Some of the facts which are probably not so often talked about, right? And related analysis about it. So it's like getting a peek on the other side of the moon, right? It may not, we think it is the darker side of the moon, but hey, it may not be, right? It's dark because we have never seen the other side. You know that, right? Humanity has not seen the other side of the moon. So it's that kind of a situation for India. People have only seen the side of India which CNN and BBC and the other Western media talks about. So let's have a look at some of the other things that happen. So fact is the what part of it? Yeah, definitely. But like, if there are lots of facts, don't complain. The point is not the fact. It's about the subsequent sort of why and how that could be a useful takeaway. So let's look at, because the previous one was just context setting. Okay, the key theme that I want to talk about is the transformation. So what are the accelerators to transformation that has taken place in India, and what are the things? Some of them are still continuing to push for the future, right? One of the first things is people with high aspirations. To me, probably this summarizes it the most. This was taken in 1995, and this is not a Photoshop picture. This guy was really the CEO. He stood there and took this picture. Look at these kids are like Tetarik youngsters, probably school age or like JC Poly age, but they were selling Tetarik. But their aspiration was nothing less. Bill Gates. They're at the lowest bottom of the pyramid, or bottom of the pyramid, but their aspiration was like, I want to be Bill Gates, right? So in one picture, you get India's feeling in 1995 that like, now we are out, we have liberalized, now we want to be, we have all the aspirations. So how did that come about? How did they get their dreams? Previously, there was no international television broadcast coming into the country. Cable TV, satellite television came in. So right down to the villages, they could get and see how people lived in foreign countries. So what they were missing and what other people had, so they knew what they could dream for. Not what they were experiencing, not the challenges that they were facing, but what is it that other people in the world live like, and what kind of aspiration and dreams that they can have. And the mobile revolution helped them share it. Most of India didn't ever have landline. India, with many other developing countries, has completely leapfrogged technology. Most people never had landline at all, so they have no knowledge about this thing. So the first internet was on the mobile for many of the people in the villages or in the second tier, third tier. So the dreams, they could share it, they could communicate. So that's a powerful transformational thing. When people start dreaming like what I want to be, not what I see in my surroundings, but like I'm going to be something different. And they share it. There are other like-minded people. They share it and they start working towards that. That's a hugely transformational thing. Now today, India has. So first it happened to the low cost of normal telephone, the mobile telephony. Now data. India has the world's cheapest data as we speak. So just recently one of these companies was launched, and they launched only 4G, only spectrum, voice over internet protocol. So even if you have a local call to be made, it goes VoIP. So there, and look at what they did. This happened to me last week. Right. I went there, my previous connection expired, so I bought a new one. I walk in, I pay 4 Singapore dollar, and I get 2 GB per day for a month, for then times that for the quarter and so on and so forth. Unlimited calls, you use your own Android. Okay, this is the rate. And whenever you read the StarHub and all those ads right now, okay, think about it. Right? They're selling like as if they are the greatest thing after sliced bread, but rubbish, right? This is what they get per day, 2 GB per day. And if you don't have your own thing and you're not the middle class, but if you're like bottom of the pyramid, you pay $1 a month and you get 1 GB per day. Again, unlimited calls, and you give a one-time $30 or 1,500 Indian rupee deposit, which is refundable as long as you stay with them for 3 years. Okay, what do you get? You don't have your own Android phone, so what do you get? They give you a feature phone, and you say like, what? This is my Nokia, and what will this do? Yes, it supports Wi-Fi. This has got Facebook. It's got WhatsApp, and Amazon and others are trying to build apps for this, or coming out with apps for this. So this is not the smartphone that we use, but it is smart enough. I mean, for somebody from bottom of the pyramid to pay $1 a month, 1 GB, and get 1 GB a day. So when I said that people are able to communicate and share and aspire and etc., it's real. It's not, and it's a very affordable cost. Oh, there are people, definitely hundreds of millions of people who can't afford this. I'm not dismissing that, but still, many could, and you don't need the $10 or $20 kind of expenses. So it's become the cheapest mobile data in the world. There are 1.7 mobile subscriptions. Yeah, that's kind of pretty close to the country's population. That's because those who can have more than one number. Many of them in the urban areas, but still the other side is not bad for the rural areas. So literally, all these, not only the white collar workers, but migrants within the country, cooks, students, many are drivers, whoever they all are able to watch videos, watch movies on their mobile, share. And as the telecom companies expected, their data consumption has grown. Now, India has like 10 GB per user per month, roughly comparable to USA. So huge jump in the broadband usage because this company brought the price down, and then their competitors also had to bring the price down. And many people are questioning the profitability, but they claim that they are profitable. But who knows, we'll figure out that later. But right now, as a consumer, enjoy it, you're getting a good deal. The other thing that happened was aspirations. When I said before that it was global level, you probably were wondering like what exactly was global level. This was global level. One aspect of the global level aspirations. So between 94 and 2000, a bunch of ladies, many of them came from middle class families and lower middle class families. And they won Miss Universe and Miss World pageants. So the idea is that like people in that level were suddenly starting to dream about, aspire at the world level, right? Not at just like national level. So, okay, glamour apart, Venkat, you showed some glamour, you showed some telecom. Is there something more fundamental that is happening? Yes. Women in higher education, undergraduate level, it is lower than men. But look at the postgrad, the numbers are higher for women than for men. And it's interesting to see some of the courses. I mean, one, you can say that, hey, there's a gender bias in the society, that there are more of them are in the nursing and so on. I don't disagree with you if you say that, but there is some other interesting statistic. It's not an as primitive a society like somewhere in Africa or something like that, which is the default assumption about that country. Yes, in nursing there are like 4 times the number of men. For teachers training, Bachelor of Education is probably twice the number of men, but it's 1:1 for medical doctors, and computer applications 1:0.75, pharma. Interesting. B.Tech. Okay, computer application is quite high, but pure engineering is low, but when it comes to masters in technology, the number starts becoming closer and closer. And a whole of masters, you find that significant number of women are taking up, there are more number of women who take up for master's programs than the men who take up master's programs. Everybody knows that there was Janet Yellen. I suppose everybody knows, right? Okay, thanks. So she was the Federal Reserve governor, right? The numero uno there. But before that, she was numero uno. She was the number 2 person for a good period of time. Right? But what many people don't know, that India already had, before she became that, India already had 3 women who had held the number 2 position for Reserve Bank of India, which is equivalent to Federal Reserve or Monetary Authority of Singapore. So, yeah, this one looks a little bit like the Indian version of Janet Yellen, but so this is not something people by default expect or think. They think like it's it's women are not in high positions. And this is not only the Reserve Bank, that the number 2 persons in the Reserve Bank were women. But many top positions, many bosses of many of India's top banks were women. And when I say top banks, Government Bank, State Bank of India, the former boss was a woman. The number 1 private sector bank, ICICI, the boss was a woman. The number 2, number 3 disputed position, Axis Bank, that one was a woman. And you find the whole, and not only that, she was the head of HSBC in India. So the whole number of financial institutions around the country, you find that the women were at the top. So you had people occupying the top positions in financial services sector as well as at the central bank in the country. Now, point is, these are facts, but what are the societal things that help? We will come to that in a moment. But was it only the banking sector? Technology was not far behind. Former boss of IBM in India, HP in India, Accenture, Intel, Capgemini, they have been headed by women at different times. Some of them have moved on to their foreign operations, some of them retired and went. But the point is, in banking and in technology, you had Indian women heading, whether it was Indian institution or whether government institution, whether it was a private institution or it was a multinational institution. So, question is, how did that happen? So, did something change in the society? Because you can have 1, but 2, but like, how is that so many women can come? So, something did transform in the society, something did transform in the industry. The middle class and upper middle class emphasized on higher education for their children, irrespective of whether they were boys and girls. So it was pretty common. Bachelor's degree is a norm, like it's like saying that you passed school in India, like unless you got a master's degree, like you haven't done anything in life kind of a approach the middle class and upper middle class has. So it's the same. So for women or for men. So and we talked about aspiration, which means double income is required to maintain those lifestyles that you are aspiring for. Right? And also, not only that, but there was also the rise of the career women who wanted to pursue their career first. So that also happened. There was also a society, part of the society where diversity was encouraged. And I had this interview which was published in Singapore media on this analysis on the bank and the technology sector and why this happened, this transformation happened. And I had, she lives in Singapore, so this lady who was one of the colleagues of the ICICI women at the top, she was one of the top 10 at that time, and who worked with all these top honchos. So she shared some of those insights. She said, in the ICICI Bank, the 3 successive chairmen, so which is literally almost for almost a generational time period, those 3 people were very particular that women would take up higher positions. And if any of the policies were more restrictive within the bank, they were in favor of those things being adjusted and accommodated so that it could be more inclusive and that there should be more women leadership groomed and opportunities should be similar for them. So she said that the credit goes to those 3 men, 3 successive chairmen who all had the same belief and philosophy. And she said that should have been also in other institutions where this happened, because the credit should be given to those people who fundamentally changed the sort of male-oriented policies that existed at the time. I'm not saying that everything changed, but I'm just giving you an analysis from insiders on why what happened. It's not about like, oh, there is a lot to be done. Yeah, sure, there is a lot to be done. And so 1/3 of the CEOs, as you saw in the previous slides, have been from women. And she, interestingly, she highlighted one thing. She said, Venkat, you talk about parents being supportive of higher education. She said, you must write it in your article that in-laws also get the required credit, should be given the necessary credit. Because there were many mothers-in-law who said, hey, go ahead, you go and pursue your career. I'll be the backup and I'll take care of the kids along with whatever maid or whoever the help is there. Or I would be that support you go ahead and go and work. So she said, make sure that you don't only give credit to the parents, but give it to the in-laws also. I said, yeah, sure. If you say so, why am I going to challenge her? So yeah, and of course, you saw the villages, people were becoming aspirational. So the way for them to earn money was, and the amount of that money they could earn in their own villages was obviously less. So they started migrating to the city. So when that happened, men went, they would probably do more physical labor. If the women went also moved to the cities, they would probably be doing the domestic help. And so there was a low-cost domestic help that should also be not ignored, not neglected. That also was a factor that's contributed to upper-class women, middle-class women, being able to pursue a career. Transformed industry became less manufacturing-oriented. Shop floor, grease and machines, parents were less in favor of sending their daughters to go and work in the shop floor. Bank, information technology companies, air-conditioned offices, nice surroundings, yeah, sure, sign up my daughter. Right? So that was yet another fundamental transformation as the country became more a service-oriented economy, especially for servicing, the newer Indian society as well as for support services for rest of the world. There was a lot of encouragement and support from the parents and in-laws for the ladies to go and work, because they were not looking at them to go and work in the shop floor but in air-conditioned offices. Large companies started setting up daycares, flexible hours, sabbatical options, and so on. Government sector banks made it a policy. Government sector companies, government-linked companies, made it a policy that if a woman had to be a husband is getting transferred, then they would try to accommodate. If they have a branch in that area, they would allow, find a way to get the wife also get transferred, even if they are like different companies and so on and so forth. So mobility, they tried to, at least the policy was there to support mobility. Selections through competitive examinations, so merit helped. So who was scored the highest, or among the top. So that helped definitely. The private sector was selecting men and women from top business schools, and entrance to top business school is again based on merit. So again, that kind of helped. So this sector of the society that you're looking at, and women who have come into work, are beneficiaries of the meritocracy and bottom line driven bank job, IT job, etc., etc. What about other transformations? So India is not all about outsourcing. I don't know how many of you know this, that 4 years ago, 6 of Singapore satellites were actually launched by India. And 2 years back, in a single launch, they launched 104 satellites in one shot. And 96 of those satellites were for US companies, which means they paid them money. Right? And there were other countries too, Switzerland, Netherlands, Israel, whoever. So they have this satellite launch facilities which they rent out to whoever wants to avail of it and pay for it. They will do that. Now, typically this is not what you associate India with, right? India makes cruise missiles. Actually, they brought one of those models and kept it in one of the air shows, the Changi air shows that we have. So once they brought it and displayed the thing. So a lot of people are surprised, you make missiles? They asked the Indian guys. So yeah, they have cruise missiles. But then, India being India, you have cruise missiles and camels coexisting. Right? They make remote sensing satellites, and many of your maps, the data do come from Indian satellites, because whoever does that, they all take those time slots, whoever flying over certain areas, so whichever satellite flies over those certain areas, so people can take the, say, this is the area I want you to map, this is the time period I want